Good evening, folks. It is April 21st, and this is the evening meeting of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Try to meet once a month evening-wise to give additional folks a chance to be with us. We are letting our attendees populate the Zoom format, and while they do that, if we could get a roll call.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bogue.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Hackett. Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Nanjapa.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 out of 7 commissioners present.
Great, and so that is a quorum, and we are able to conduct our business. The general public is still rolling in, and we'll get into public comment here in just a minute. We have 13 folks signed up for public comment this evening. We look forward to hearing from them. Before we move to general public comment, we have on our agenda a short report from the director. Director Murphy, do you have anything for us this evening?
I would like to defer to next week, given that I'm kind of just getting back up to speed after taking a few days off.
Perfectly acceptable. Glad to have you back and glad that you were able to take off. Certainly well-deserved time off. So with that, we will continue down our agenda, and we do have general public comment at this point in time. I would remind folks that each public commenter has up to 3 minutes for public comment. We've been having folks run over time kind of somewhat consistently, and so this evening at 3 minutes, I will say the word time, and I would ask the public commenter at that time to wrap up their thoughts or stop. That way we're able to get through all of the public commenters and give everybody the equal amount of time to comment before us. I do note, as I try to do each week, that we do take written public comment, and we always read those written public comments, and sometimes written public comments is just as helpful as or more than oral comments, but we take both. So with that, I would look to which of my hearings managers is going to help me out this evening? Is that Ms. Larson?
Ms. Amaro will be letting the commenters in, and I'm happy, Mr. Chair, to call the names out of the individuals who will be presenting. It's however you would like to approach this evening.
Yeah, why don't we have, let's do it that way, and then you can call the individuals out because you'll know if they're with us, and then I'll be in charge of time, and we'll look forward to hearing from our public commenters.
Excellent. Happy to do that. So the first individual we have signed up is Ms. Megan Neufeld. Ms. Neufeld, it looks like you are in the meeting.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
Okay, I will begin. First off, I hope this story isn't boring to listen to. After all, I'm sure you've heard many that are very similar, and of course, that is part of the problem. Back in the fall, wanting to take my dogs on a walk, I checked the air quality for what felt like the 100th day in a row and looked out my window at the hazy mountains. I sighed, hoping the air quality might be better tomorrow. Days later, the Cowwood fire began burning just miles from my home. My family had our bags packed on pre-evacuation for a week and a half until the fire had finally been contained. I'm tired of watching our forests be burned, our waters be poisoned, and our air be toxined. According to the 350 Colorado report, Avoiding a Roadmap to Climate Catastrophe, the oil and gas sector in Colorado is responsible for 70% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions when emissions from exported oil and gas are included. Despite this, the passage of HB 191261, or the fact that our state just experienced 3 of the worst wildfires in our state's history due to the worsening climate crisis, no rules have been implemented to reduce permitting and decrease oil and gas production and the associated greenhouse gas emissions. Not only this, but in recent years, the number of U.S. oil and gas companies filing for bankruptcy has climbed, and those in Colorado are no exception. Our state is the 5th highest state for the number of oil and gas companies that have filed for bankruptcy. If Colorado truly wanted to do its part to address the climate crisis, our state must manage a phase out of oil and gas production by 2030. I grew up believing the lie that things had to be this way. We had to have extreme weather events, raging wildfires, and relentless smoke every year. We had to have disgusting fossil fuel plants, dirty water, and poisoned air. A better future is right in front of us, but we will not get there unless you do all you can to protect Coloradans. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Neufeld, for being with us this evening and taking time out of your evening to present to us, and we appreciate your comments.
Of course, thank you.
Mr. Chair, next we have Ms. Kate Christensen.
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. Hi all, thanks for taking the time to hear comments this evening. I wanted to talk a little bit about the 700 series and continue to encourage the Commission to look at full cost bonding, cash bonding, and getting rid of blanket bonds. But also I wanted to encourage the Commission to expand the thinking with, kind of piggybacking off what Megan just said, to use this as an opportunity to address the climate crisis. There are a lot of emissions coming out of all these temporary wells, idle wells, the ones that aren't really being used, the stripper wells that no one really wants to pay to shut down, and all of that methane, all of the greenhouse gases, all the VOCs are contributing to our climate crisis and also our public health problems. As you know, Colorado has an F- air quality rating from the American Lung Association and has for the past 10 years. So the other piece of that I'd like the Commission to consider, besides the fact that all of these wells are creating a ton of pollution, is the way that we plug and abandon wells. There's research happening in Texas and Montana about using things other than concrete to plug these wells. And I think it would behoove the Commission to form a task force to look into this, because plugging wells with concrete leaks, concrete shrinks, the making of concrete itself is a hugely climate intensive process. So doing something like biochar, I don't know if that's the answer, the research still needs to happen. Other materials could sequester carbon and create wells that are not leaking all over the place for the next generation. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen, for joining us this evening and for your comments.
Next, Mr. Chair, we have Mr. Wes Wilson.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, Mimi. To repeat what the representative from 350 is saying, I can see the blank looks on your faces when she's describing that this Commission deal with methane from the wells you're permitting. You probably have concluded that's only with the Air Quality Control Commission. But this Commission has not done its 181 job of assessing cumulative impacts, getting an offset policy that would certainly have to apply to VOC and NOx for the ozone SIP, but it could also apply to methane. But she brings up another important point, and that's the carbon footprint of these wells. And what this Commission can do creatively to require operators to show that they're moving in the direction, requirements of 1261, to proportionally reduce their carbon emissions associated with their steel, their equipment, their cement. And that brings up one point about plugging and abandonment, that this Commission should consider bentonite in lieu of cement. it could have a lower carbon footprint, but more importantly, it has sufficient plasticity to protect the well from methane leaks for a long period. So in conclusion, this commission needs to task its engineers to assess the carbon footprint of the facilities you're approving and to see how operators can creatively reduce that in order to meet the industry-wide obligations under 1261. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for joining us this evening and for your comments.
Mr. Chair, next we have Shayna Oliver.
Hello? Can you hear?
Ms. Oliver, we can hear you, yes.
Hi, thank you for providing this opportunity for public comment. My name is Shayna Oliver, and I am a field organizer for Moms Clean Air Force Equal Madres Colorado chapter, representing more than 37,000 members in the state. But most importantly, I am a mother of 4 children. My children and I are tribal affiliates of the Navajo Nation, descendants of the genocide known as the Long Walk of the Navajo. I currently live in Denver, Colorado with my children and husband, and today I'm urging you to adhere to Senate Bill 181 and protect communities whose health is put at risk from breathing harmful ground level ozone pollution and is contributed by oil and gas development and operations. And as an Indigenous woman, as well as those who are Black, brown, and low-income workers are systemically segregated into communities disproportionately impacted by air pollution. And we do not account for the homeless that are camped outside who are exposed to the worst poor air quality, according to American Lung Association. You can also sign up for alerts for ozone levels in communities. And we shouldn't have to be alerted of toxic chemicals. Like, this should be prevented at this department for your leadership in this position of protecting the environment and public health over permits. And as being an Indigenous, we have the highest rates in asthma, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, leukemia, mental illness, adverse birth outcomes, and premature deaths than white counterparts. I myself was born prematurely, low birth weight, and with a birth defect, as well as being diagnosed with asthma in my infancy. Because of gentrification and redlining, we're segregated to live near Suncor refinery, as well as being displaced. Our best options of finding homes were in Adams County, where commissioners have approved more extraction permits near single family homes, parks, and schools. Suncor already has a long history of violations and is the second largest polluter of volatile organic compounds in the state, which can contribute to forming more ozone and affect health. Compounding the ozone air pollution problem is also the oil and gas development in the state. Like, we are now at serious attainment for air pollution in the state for ozone. And as a mother of 4, and as well as Moms Clean Air Force members, we're looking to leadership to do their part in protecting the environment and public health for the next 7 generations. And so please work courageously in achieving reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, adhering to our climate goals of reducing greenhouse gases at the necessary reductions in order to sustain economic well-being for all and not just some. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us and providing those comments, Ms. Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Marie Venner.
Do I need to, can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we can also see you, Ms. Venner.
Okay, great. My name is Marie. Actually, I'll switch to something. Okay. My name is Marie Venner. I'm a mom, a family with 3 generations in Colorado on each side, a 23-year Colorado business owner, and a leader in faith, business, and community coalitions. I want to express
Venner,
our... Yes? Is there a problem?
Ms. Venner, if you could hold for a sec.
I'm sorry, say that again. Do I need to stop?
One moment, Ms. Venner. I believe Mr. Robbins' feed may have paused for a moment.
Oh, okay. I'll
We'll
just
give him a
wait.
second to catch up.
Sure.
It may be that Chair Robbins' feed, I think he's going to rejoin.
Okay, no problem.
We'll give it a minute or two. Thank you. Mr. Chair, we paused while we gave your internet feed a time to catch back up.
Thank you. Apologies for that, everybody.
Not a problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. So Ms. Venner, if you'd like to begin again, we will start your time over.
Okay, thanks. My name is Marie Venner. I'm a mom, a family with 3 generations in Colorado on each side, a 23-year Colorado business owner, and a leader in faith, business, and community coalitions. I want to express our concerns in several areas. To start, Colorado is still not requiring continuous monitoring of emissions at oil and gas sites or making that transparently available to the public. Much more action is needed to follow up on the charge in SB 181 in imperatives at all levels, including the commitments and laws from 2019 to 26% reduction in pollution by 2025. We are counting on you to deliver this. It's time for us all to be honest and accountable. There is really no room to permit more fracking. There's international agreement that oil and gas production must decline at 6% a year, or I should say it should be reduced at 6% a year. That's existing production, not allowing any new production. Colorado's current track and plan is to do the opposite, This might seem careless and irresponsible in terms of our responsibilities internationally, but it's also enormously irresponsible for Coloradans and Colorado's future. I want to show you an image here. In 2015, NASA published projections that Colorado was on track for an 80% chance of a 30+ year dust bowl. In 2020, the researchers updated this and confirmed it is happening much earlier than expected. Colorado, the entire state, is in the brownest bullseye of this. It would destroy our state's economy and livability, not to mention ag. Half of my family is from ag. Food systems from the Midwest to California's Central Valley. I'm a responsible business owner. It is essential that you ensure that businesses in this sector that you oversee are responsible as well, and that the cost burden of closure is fully covered, not irresponsibly bounced around. Now is your time. You are capable leaders, and I have faith in you. Please do your job and be courageous and responsible for the people of Colorado, instead of being servants of interests that are less than 1% of us here in Colorado. With the oil and gas industry in financial collapse, Colorado can't afford to keep approving more oil and gas extraction. The state needs to focus on securing financial assurances from companies to ensure that they're financially viable and require bonding of at least $270,000 per well, the average cost of cleanup and capping orphaned and abandoned wells on federal lands, with no per company cap, to ensure that Colorado taxpayers are left paying to clean up the mess, as is happening in numerous other states as fracking companies go bankrupt. If you want additional motivation, most of the Front Range has an F-grade air quality, according to the American Lung Association, and is in serious non-attainment of ozone standards. There are better paths forward in replacement income streams for communities currently dependent on fossil fuels. Our coalition of 76 organizations, community and statewide organizations, has outlined what those are. It's all
Ms.
about
Venner,
ownership
time.
and responsibility. We're counting on you. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Venner, for testifying this evening.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, next up we have Barbara Mills-Bria.
Great. And I'm going to toggle my video on and off to make use of the bandwidth that I seem to have. So I'm still here.
So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Since 181 was signed into law, 2,915 wells have been, permits have been approved. In 2020 alone, over 1,500 wells were permitted. And since the beginning of this year, we're up to 413 already. Einstein famously said, "You cannot simultaneously prepare for and prevent war." In a similar manner, you cannot simultaneously reduce greenhouse gases and methane and continue to permit new wells. The oil industry in Colorado would like you to think they are and will continue to be vital to our economy. This is false. We are moving to electrification of everything, including transportation and heating. So let's get rid of this crutch that prevents us from saving the climate and protecting public health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miles-Bria.
Next, Mr. Chair, we have listed Ian Thomas Tafoya. I'll defer to Ms. Amaro, but I don't believe Mr. Tafoya is in the audience, but
He is not. I have not found him either.
okay, thank you. We do have one participant who's raised their hand, Hilda Nusset. Perhaps Hilda is Mr. Tafoya. Ms. Amaro, if you don't mind chatting with them to see. Oh, we'll bring them in. Thank you.
Hi, actually, yes, my name is Ian, and I'm using someone else's phone. My phone died, and the best I could do was find this on her phone, and I'm glad this worked out. It's like perfect timing. Can I go ahead and start then?
Yes, please.
Okay, hi, my name is Ian Thomas Tafoya. I am the co-chair of the Colorado Latino Forum, a nonprofit based here in Colorado, working on environmental justice issues among many other forms of justice. And I also work for Green Latinos as a Colorado field advocate, where I work all across the state on environmental justice issues. And I'm here just today to ring the alarm about the concerns of the whistleblowers, the concerns my community's had for a very long time about wells, their disproportionate impact on my community, leftovers that are destroying people's homes and their lives like they did in Firestone and Frederick, where my grandfather is buried. All across northern Colorado, southern Colorado, people of color are being subjected to increased amounts of pollution as a result of the oil and gas industry. The continued expansion of this industry is damaging our water and damaging my people. And now that COVID is reaching an end, I will let you know that my people see more reason now more than ever to show up in these spaces and to speak out. We ask you to do the right thing to protect people above all else. And hopefully you can see this legacy redlining and environmental racism for what it is, and you can be a part of changing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tafoya, for being with us this evening.
Mr. Chair, next up we have JD Roybal.
Buenas tardes. Listo? Is time ready?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Just to bring everybody up to speed, you know, because most times people are involved in their community. There's a lot of stuff going on. So first I want to say is thank you all for allowing people to go over the time, because sometimes people need to speak and we're actually restricted so much that we can't speak. And so when people do go over, I appreciate that you've allowed that time to go. What I wanted to say is I was on a couple of video conferences this weekend, and one of them we had the pleasure of having an ex-employee of the industry, and the way he described how they use essentially terrorism to convince people of different things, it was really quite telling. And the end of what he said was, it's actually about accountability. And him, as well as a lot of these folks, are starting to come to realize what's at stake for them and their family as well. So I thought that's something that's important. You have to decide what side of the team you're going to be on, and some of these workers are actually deciding what side of the battle they're going to be on. The next thing I'd like to mention is there was a conversation a little bit ago about relinquishing some of your authority to the local municipalities. One thing that I need to say that is I would kind of hesitate, or I'd speak against that right now if you're considering it. And this was on video. What I did is I went to our town board meeting, and I had two aerials, one from one time period to another time period, and it showed the red dots, which showed the number of wells that were inflicted from one time frame to another. And our mayor actually asked, what are those red dots? So when you consider relinquishing your authority, I believe what you need to do is ensure that the municipalities understand that there are other venues and there's other interests and there's other knowledge other than this, what's given by the industry. And again, as I started the conversation saying that we're not allowed time to speak, I think this is very important to understand that we do, in fact, there's more knowledge in just the industry. And again, I do appreciate allowing people to go over. Buenas noches.
Thank you, Mr. Roybal. Normally we just listen to public comment, but I do want to address that last point. I don't know, unfortunately, I do not know what context you're speaking to about commission relinquishing authority to local municipalities. We've undertaken 2.5 years worth of rules and regulations to implement 181, and it does not involve relinquishing authority. It does involve working with local communities and creating avenues for that. But we have our own rules and regulations and are working under them. So just want to clarify the record on that front.
Can I clarify?
Sure.
There was actually a state Kurtmeyer right now, she's a state representative. It was brought up by her and other individuals that they're looking to actually have municipalities kind of take over some of the area. So, and it may not be something formal, but just because I'd heard something like this and I live within a community, that these conversations about secession, et cetera, are conversations that are being had. If you hear about this or something, I'm just kind of saying this is what happened. But yes, from my understanding, within this community, there has in fact been conversations about them actually taking on the authority to govern the actual development of oil and gas within their communities. And I have in fact heard that. And again, I'm not trying to dispute what you're saying. I'm just telling you what I've heard, just for clarification. And again, that's why it's important we bring this up, because Weld County did in fact talk about secession. So.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Next up, Mr. Chair, we have Guillermo Serna. Mr. Serna, if you'd like to unmute your feed, we're ready for you.
You hear him? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Now.
Okay. Let me go to a quieter room. Look, we've been at this for the last, since right around 2020, okay? Recently. Hello.
We can hear you. Yeah, yes, we can hear you, Mr. Serna.
Yeah. Look, here's the situation. You're supposed to be building trust with the community. Yet it's taken this long to understand that the more we dig into this earth, it's getting weaker and weaker just by what we're taking out. We keep getting more of these meteors coming closer and closer to the population. Commerce City, according to the science from the oil companies, only has 100 years of value there. But yet they're going to destroy Commerce City's growth again. And they're developing a brand new industry, cities and everything out there. The space freight here in Adams County, our government is not protecting us. As far as Adams County commissioners, as far as our city people, they're selling us. And at the same time, they're killing us. I see 3 mothers here. I went through this with paint in the old homes here in Commerce City, Old Town. We went through hell trying to get the arsenal clean. Nobody cares. But yet they take credit for it. Spend millions of billions of dollars to fix it. Then they want it to come in. You mothers have got to look at this. You have to protect your children, which is the whole state of Colorado. How much more do we not believe in science? The lady before me on the first time there, she mentioned, when Colorado was losing sand and gravel and everything, Oklahoma, Texas, the sandstorms. Look at what happened. The people didn't believe then that all this dust was going to be picked up, but it did. The government tried to tell them, but it's just the opposite right now. You're not helping us at all. Does the governor really believe in science in creating this situation of power? We have the sun. Do we believe, or do you believe, that the president is going in the right way by increasing energy from the sun or any which way, when, and everything? I see this picture that you have behind you, ma'am, and it looks beautiful. But we're in a drought situation, regardless of how much snow we get. Commerce City only has water enough for 100 years. What's going to happen then? Simply because of the growth that we're going to go through again. Now, if the
Sharon, if you could wrap up.
If the governor is serious about what and trusting you to bring in, you have enough information. Don't let the money makers, and remember that everybody's life, okay? Everybody's life cares. And it's up to you to make the right decision and put a stop to this by making the governor bring in the Republicans and the Democrats to please come up and stop these companies from doing and digging just simply because they got rights to permits and this and that. It's
Thank
up
you,
to
Mr.
you
Serna.
to tell.
You're over time. Appreciate it. Thank you for being with us this evening.
All I have to say, I get tired of hearing.
Mr. Chair, next up we have Christy Douglas.
Hello. Hello.
Good evening. We can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, commissioners, for giving me the opportunity to come back and speak once again. My name's Christy Douglas. I come from the disproportionately impacted community of Commerce City in Adams County. Wife, mom, grandmother to 5. I'm a very active member of the community. And I do want to say that thank you for allowing me to tell my story last time I spoke. I know that I took extra time, but I thought it was really important that you hear me out and hear what I've been going through for the last over a decade now in trying to protect my community. So I just don't know where to start. I do want to bring up the whistleblower incident. I don't want that to go away. I want people to know that it is going on and it's underway. And what I would like to know is if you're taking that into consideration as well, how does this impact the permits that you've issued, especially when it relates to cumulative impacts? If it comes out that the whistleblowers are right, which I'm sure they're not whistleblowing just to do it and be in the spotlight, it takes courage to do something like that. So what's going to happen when they find out that what they are saying is accurate? How does that impact what you've already done and how we move forward? I really think that you need to take that into consideration. I would ask that you put a moratorium on permits going forward until we do find out what the findings are of this investigation, and that perhaps you'll have to go back and maybe take away some of those permits and look at what the real impacts are. So I just want you to keep that in the forefront of your mind. I do appreciate you listening to me week after week, but I have to be present, because if I'm not doing something, I'm not doing anything.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas, for those comments. I do want to address the issue that you raise concerning the whistleblower complaint. And I just want everyone at our meeting to understand that that incident that is being looked into does not involve Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. That involves Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. And so we're different agencies, and so we're not involved with that. And I just want the record to reflect that so that folks don't get a misunderstanding. So again, thank you, Ms. Douglas, for being with us yet again this evening. Ms. Larson, who do we have next?
Next up, we have Mr. Brent Goodlett.
Hi there. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. As the COGCC continues its work on matters like financial assurances and the 700 series rulemakings pertaining to well site remediation and plugging of orphaned wells, after fossil fuel corporations extract all the profits they can muster and leave their mess for Colorado taxpayers to foot the bill, I come before you today one day before the 51st Earth Day celebrations and amidst a week of climate action in response to the growing climate crisis of devastating fires in the West, extreme hurricanes in the Gulf and along the eastern seaboard, terrible droughts, and countless other climate-linked disasters that will continue to get worse as we continue to fail to act. I beg you to wake up to the terrible fate that we are condemning our future generations to. These unsustainable, extractive industries are not going to be a part of Colorado's future economy. The only question is how quickly we make the transition away from this deadly and environmentally destructive practice. So deadly, in fact, that earlier this year, a study from Birmingham University and Harvard published findings that in 2018, 8.7 million deaths globally are attributable to air pollution from fossil fuels. That's 1 in 5 of all deaths from air toxins like ozone, sulfur dioxide, benzene, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter. Pollution that facilities like Suncor's refinery in Commerce City and Excel's fossil fuel power plants in Pueblo, Craig, Routt, and Morgan counties emit every day, right here in our own backyard. Given our continued inaction, it's no wonder that we're facing worsening air quality along the Front Range of Colorado, particularly for ozone, which puts the region in the top 10 worst places in the country for this terrible and debilitating pollutant. I can't even reckon the decisions this commission continues to make to approve production and permitting that releases these volatile oxides, volatile organic compounds, and other precursors to deadly ozone. And worse, how many of these fossil fuel projects will end up becoming stranded assets in coming years as we transition away from these deadly sources of energy, which will leave the state holding the bag for all of these remediation procedures and to clean up the mess. Dear commissioners, I beg of you to do what you know in your heart is right and to put our children's future above the concerns of heartless, profit-driven corporations. For if not you, then who? And if not now, then when?
Thank you, Mr. Goodlett, for being with us this evening and for the comments.
Next up,
Larson, who do we have next?
Yes, we have Mr. Steve Douglas next.
Good evening, Chair and COGC Commissioner members. Last year, April 2020 was an example of what Clean Air Act could do for Colorado. The air was pure, clear, and the skyline was beautiful. Fast forward to April 2021, today, I read the headlines in National Geographic issue. And it says, the fight for clean air. Air pollution causes 7 million premature deaths a year, but we can fix it. Air pollution kills millions every year like a pandemic in slow motion. Even though SB 19181 passed, this bill didn't put forward a reduction or a pause with permits. There is no justification for incentives for oil and gas industry, so let's start with no more incentives for extracting fossil fuels. This will keep the state off the hamster wheel of the oil and gas. With the goal of reducing greenhouse gases, congratulations to Cultivando proposal 2 nights ago for being funded to start collecting important information with deadly toxins around the Suncor plant in Commerce City. In the northern range of Commerce City, we live near E470 Frack Highway. So let's take that into account with the greenhouse gases as well. All agencies should be working together to reduce greenhouse gases. What is your plan for reducing greenhouse gases towards reducing emissions? So far, our effects are reducing greenhouse gases look more like a dog chasing its tail. We spend so much time debating strong language and then selling on extending oil and gas regulations and not a stop dead date with oil and gas permits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas.
Mr. Chair, our final commenter this evening is Ms. Heidi Lethwood.
I'll do anything.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for hearing comments. I'm Heidi Leithwood, and I want to talk today about the emissions created by stripper wells. It seemed that there were questions about this in the financial assurances hearings that I listened to, and we have not yet had adequate study about this in Colorado. I want to point you in the direction of a study published in September 2020 that has measured this in Ohio. It was conducted by the Department of Geology at the University of Cincinnati and found on pubmed.gov. It varied, of course, well to well, but on average, stripper wells emitted 11% of total methane from oil and gas production and produced only 0.2% of oil and 0.4% of gas. That's doing dozens of times more harm than their share of the benefit. They also found that many of them were venting all of their reported production into the atmosphere, or saying that they had zero production because they vented all of their production. Sorry, I hope you can still hear me with all the cat meowing. I hope you will take this into consideration as you decide how to determine the end of a well's life and when it must no longer be allowed to be operated. The financial assurance rules can have a huge impact on the big picture. If sufficient assurances are in place, we know that there will be enough money to properly abandon and plug wells. If not, we do not know this and we are being irresponsible. Full financial assurances for plugging and reclamation costs should be required for each and every well. Looking at an average of $270,000 for plugging and reclaiming wells on federal lands, or looking at your own estimate of $82,000, give you a range of what a full assurance would be. Adequate assurances would not only have the effect of protecting the public from pollution and cleanup costs, they would naturally create the gradual decline in natural gas production that is necessary in our state. Why should companies be allowed to operate wells if they can't afford the costs of doing business? Why should they be artificially propped up? The industry's representatives on the financial assurances hearings on March 31st spoke and said that they thought the purpose of rulemaking was to ensure the health of the industry. They don't seem to understand that no longer are you the commission to ensure the health of the industry, but you are the commission to ensure the health of the people and the environment, which includes managing the reduction of emissions as required by law. I ask that you ensure a gradual phase out of new oil and gas development in our state of 10% per year, and in addition, closing 10% of existing wells per year, starting with those that would not currently be permitted under the new setback rules. I also ask that you have zero tolerance for requests for exceptions to the setbacks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Leithwood. if you could you email to me the link to the study that you cited?
Yes, I would be
And
happy to. I have a link to the abstract at my fingertips, but I can use my, I can obtain the full article. Would you rather have the full article?
that would be awesome.
Okay, I will do
And
that.
my email is my name, jeff.robbins@state.co.us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us this evening. Ms. Larson, that concludes public comment.
It does indeed.
All right, great. Then, with all my computer problems, I don't have my agenda, but I think we're going to Greg Duranolo now.
That is correct. Mr. Duranlo is next, and we will bring him in, and he will be in the meeting in just a moment.
Hello and good evening. I trust you can hear me.
We can.
Excellent. Then I will share my screen. We'll see how that works and get started with a brief PowerPoint presentation. It looks like I'm sharing, so perfect. All right, well, good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to come back and kind of finish the informational docket that we started last week. Unfortunately, I had to run out. I had to see a drill rig and wound up with a few extra fillings in my teeth. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come back this evening. I just want to take a few minutes and provide staff's perspective on a few of the things that we heard from the industry panelists last week that I feel like I want to provide a little bit of color as to how staff views some of that surface planning in light of our rules. So first, I would say that the rules that you've adopted really stress the practice of avoiding impacts, minimizing impacts that can't be avoided, and mitigating those residual impacts. And we've heard this avoid, minimize, and mitigate triad over and over. And so one of the things that I saw, and let me first say that I was certainly impressed by the level of planning that was evident in the operators' presentations. A lot goes into their surface location selection, and I think that was very clear. But from COGCC's staff perspective, we really want to make sure that that site selection process includes, avoiding impacts first. And so one of the things that I saw in a presentation was this, and the concept and notion that it all begins with a good surface use agreement. And absolutely, a good surface use agreement with a willing landowner is really, really important. The word that concerns me is begins. And I would say that it shouldn't begin with the surface use agreement. It should begin with good site selection. And so the rules really encourage operators to bring the ALA, the alternative location analysis, into the process before negotiating with the surface owner. And the tool of the ALA can be used to really find not just the best location, but also the best surface owner. The best surface owner would be the surface owner with the best location. And so the ALA is not intended to be a site justification tool or a way of saying, hey, we've worked out this site with this surface owner, and here's why it's a good site. It's a planning tool. Let's find the best site and let's bring that best site forward. And as I mentioned, I mean, operators do have a long history of seeking out the best locations, and they have really in-depth methodologies for that. But the best location, you know, may be in the eye of the beholder. What's best for the operator? What's best for the surface owner? What's best for the local government? What's best for neighbors? And ultimately, we want to find what's best under COGCC rules, because that's where impacts are avoided. So I'm going to turn to an example that was presented to you last Thursday, last Wednesday. And section 13 here was evaluated by an operator to find the best location. And you saw the challenges that were faced in that location selection. But I want to point out that if you look to the south, you can see development by the same operator and their proposal to drill 2-mile horizontal laterals from a surface location almost a half-mile outside of that area of mineral development. So if we show that same area near that section 13 where those minerals may be developed, we recognize that we can look further than just that section 13 that was so challenging. And so if we look closer up here to the north, where we're outside of a floodplain, which was actually a factor that wasn't mentioned in the operator's analysis, it's outside of the floodplain, it's farther away from the developed neighborhoods, and we see there's some pretty open land. And if we look closer at that, while we can see that there are some rural residential homes, there's some large tracts of land. And up here, removed from the area of mineral development, but not removed more than a 1/4 mile, you know, there's land with no homes around. You could be outside of a center pivot irrigation system, maybe on dry land or flood irrigated land. You have multiple landowners up here to work with, and I think many opportunities to find a best location. So the next thing I want to talk about is a land use tool that local governments use, and that's compatibility. And it's really an important consideration. And I'm going to look at another example that was brought forward last week just to illustrate this. And so this was a site that was shown to you and you know, shown as a success story for selecting good locations, working with the local governments, working with the landowners to find the right location. But compatibility, you know, there's not always a single jurisdiction. In this case, the location is in one jurisdiction. There's a municipality, you know, very close by, and a second county nearby as well. So, you know, that compatibility issue is not just about a single jurisdiction or a single landowner, and you have to look at the bigger picture. And commissioners, you will be tasked with looking at this bigger picture when location proposals and oil and gas development plans come before you. And you have to look at potential for cumulative impacts, of course, when you are looking at that compatibility issue. So if you look at that area from 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet away from this location, and granted our old, you know, setback requirements were at 1,000 feet, you can see there are hundreds of homes, you know, very nearby this location. And so you might look at this and say, while it was compatible with the surface owner's land use, and it was compatible with the local government, the relevant local government's desire for land use in this area, it wasn't necessarily compatible for the surrounding land uses and the surrounding jurisdictions. And because of that incompatibility, we wound up with hundreds of complaints on this location. And from dozens of complainants. And the nuisance conditions on this site were very real impacts to those people. And beyond that, it results in hours spent by COGCC staff, responding to, addressing those complainants. The operator has to respond to and address those complaints as well, and becomes a pretty significant issue for all. So just to summarize, and I apologize about the phone ringing in the background. Again, I want to come back to that concept of avoid, minimize, and mitigate. We don't want to be finding those circumstances where we have incompatible land uses, or where we're not looking farther to find locations that avoid impacts. So we always want to strive for the best. We do have to plan for otherwise, because we may have the best location identified and an unwilling surface owner. And so the alternative location analysis tool, again, is really meant to identify the best locations. And ideally, you can identify, or an operator can identify, multiple best locations, and possibly on multiple surface owners, as in the first example I showed, where you might have several different surface owners, and all the locations would be kind of equally good. Then it might come down to who's the most willing surface owner. But the planning has to commence before that surface use agreement negotiation. Many operators have been doing this for a long time, and they may have surface use agreements that date back to 2017 or 2018, or they may have come with an old vertical well. And we can't rely on those old surface use agreements, because they might not have resulted in the best location, the most compatible location. And so, again, using that ALA, the alternative location analysis, I want to encourage operators to, work with COGCC staff early. Staff may be able to help steer operators to locations that may be more compatible, better from an impact avoidance standpoint. Staff may be able to identify concerns and technical issues with potential locations, and identify early on in the process if BMPs, best management practices, would be necessary to address impacts and minimize impacts that can't be avoided. And staff may not be able to weigh in on which locations the operator should carry forward. If they've got 3 potential locations and they're asking for an opinion from staff on, hey, well, should we take this location to the commission or this location to the commission? Obviously, we can't prejudge, your decision, but we can identify technical concerns with the locations and provide that input back to an applicant. And so to minimize locations where impacts may not be able to be avoided, staff certainly will be looking at the best management practices, the operational measures, and with the plans and drawings that are required to be attached to a Form 2A and included in the oil and gas development plan. We definitely believe that we will have a good handle on those issues by the time we're putting forward a recommendation to the commission. And then lastly, I'd just like to mention, the last side of that triangle, mitigation. And we've talked about mitigation for wildlife and codified the requirements for compensatory mitigation for wildlife. But it's not something we've talked a lot about for, locations other than those wildlife locations. And maybe that is something that operators can think about as they move forward. Maybe there's they're looking at a location and they recognize that there will be potential nuisance impacts to a surrounding neighborhood or nearby neighborhood. And maybe that neighborhood doesn't have access to a playground and there's land available for something like that. maybe there's a nearby school where the ball fields need maintenance. And I'm not saying that that's, something that has to be conditioned, but I am saying that that's something that I think should be considered when we are looking at, residual impacts that can be minimized, but not necessarily avoided. Maybe a wall to minimize sound from a highway might do more than a wall to minimize the sound from an oil and gas location for a group of neighbors. And then one other thing that was touched on that I'm not going to spend time on was, that there was a lot of discussion, especially from the West Slope operators, about the reclamation issues. And certainly, again, we do want operators to work with and have well-developed relationships with their surface owners. But there are a lot of issues with the reclamation, and I believe that you will be getting a separate informational docket on reclamation. So I didn't want to go into the details of that here. But Chairman Robbins, that's all I have as sort of a closing and follow-up to the presentation last week, and I'm certainly available for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Geronimo. I really appreciate that follow-up with the environmental team's perspective on moving forward under our rules and regulations. I think that was helpful. I'm going to encourage you to take the video and the recording of this and play it at the next operator meeting, because I don't think we've got a lot of operators on the video tonight. It's an evening meeting, and we have a lot of our stakeholders from the communities. But I think it's a good message for them to hear, and I look forward to your team working with them as they move forward with their oil and gas development plans coming forward. Do any commissioners have questions from Mr. Geronimo? And again, apologies for my video being off. I am here. I'm just trying to deal with difficult Wi-Fi. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So again, thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. At this time, we will move on with our agenda. And I believe we have a consent agenda consisting of 4 items. Are there any questions from commissioners concerning consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Perhaps the chair is no longer with us.
Sounds so ominous. Right. I just got a note from him that he's frozen right now. Not in the Elsa kind of way, but I don't know if, sorry. I spent a lot of time with toddlers over the weekend. I don't know if we want to proceed without him or wait for him to reconnect.
Let's give him a few minutes, I think.
Commissioners, I just received a text from Chair Robbins that it looks as if his internet is probably not going to allow him to rejoin us this evening. So if we wanted to proceed with Commissioner Mesner's motion, I believe we can go ahead and do so.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Ms. Larson, is it anything else on the agenda?
We do have on the agenda commissioner comments, and Mr. Chair Robbins has rejoined us.
Trying with my third phone here. Maybe I can. Did we get through consent, Ms. Larson?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Commissioner comments. I'm seeing no comments. I believe that we would move to adjourn at this point.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.